Question time is central to democratic accountability. Any system that delays or fills it excessively ruins democracy. The Speaker has authority, but must exercise it with restraint. When the Speaker is politically connected to the executive, restraint must be even more visible.
Mr. Speaker, the standing order says the questions are delivered before the sitting of the House. The decision was that at least 24 hours before. If a member submits his or her question 24 hours before, it's no business of the member whether the Speaker look at it or not. It's supposed to be with it before the sitting. It can be 10 minutes before. It can be 10 minutes before. Okay? So the Speaker says 24 hours. The member make them available to the clerk before. Okay? Deliver to the clerk 24 hours before. It's not member's fault. So we can't say the Speaker didn't have the time to look at them. Why did you ask to wait 24 hours before? It's not member's fault. The Speaker, the member says no business whether or not the Speaker look at it. It's our obligation to do it before. So don't tell the member this time. Don't tell the member the Speaker didn't get a chance to look at it. That's not unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. And we should bring the House to that level to come with this nonsense about the chance to read. Nonsense.
Mr. Speaker, having followed the logic of the leader of government business and the ruling by the Speaker, what we are doing is concentrating the powers of a gatekeeper into the hands of the Speaker. Because if you submit something and the Speaker decides that it's going to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we can end up in a situation where the tabling of the questions will be delayed until the matter is no longer relevant. Now, where did this 24 hours come from? And why is it that we were referring to 24 hours and then the pushback to say that it was late by half an hour no longer stood, now that it is going to be tabled during question time, and at the discretion of the Speaker, maybe this year the questions will be deemed appropriate.
I was actually in the House one Tuesday afternoon when the Speaker made a big point about making sure that the questions came in time before. Yes, sitting here, no one told me. I heard it with my own 2 ears. In fact, the point that he raised was the point a member sought to make. And he was made to seem as if he was ignorant of the standing orders. In fact, the Speaker did say that he should know better because he had been here before. And so I do not want us to just run across it like that and pretend that the Speaker did not give us different instructions separate to the note that she has written. In fact, if you just in fact, the problem has been that in trying to keep order, sometimes the Speaker goes beyond, yes, what she is supposed to. And I think that just a little discretion and treating us as adults, listen to the points that we are making, that conversation could assist.
Mr. Speaker, all I wish to say at the outset, one, rulings from the chair, from the Speaker's chair, have been controversial in recent times. This Parliament has seen speakers from both sides. It has never. We have never had these levels of controversies about the Speaker's ruling. They have been easily adhered to by either side. We have walked that road. The Privileges Committee in the Parliament sets out a way to arrive at a consensus around how the House's business are conducted. It is not for the Speaker to unilaterally, arbitrarily set rules at the running of the House. And there's a reason for that, Mr. Speaker. The Parliament will change from time to time. And whichever side is in government is expected to abide by the commonly agreed rules. And it's for that reason why the rules in the House ought to be arrived at through consensus on both sides. Not by the opposition by itself, and neither by the government. It's a parliament of members. And all we're asking for, the rules that will obtain as it regards to questions or any other matters, private members' motion, how they are deal with procedurally, the ruling of the Speaker as an umpire is to ensure that the decision of the moment when the House is in session is in keeping with those agreed provisions. Now, Mays, that is not a standing order, is recognized because it says both sides must agree. So even if the standing order is not explicit on a particular point, there is nonetheless an agreed way in which those matters are dealt with. Mr. Speaker, I respectfully and humbly submit. Yes. If we continue with that convention, which has not been controversial before, we won't have much of the problems in the House. And for heaven's sake, we don't want posterity to judge the tenure of this House in a very unfavorable way. So I make a plea. Let us just revert to an orderly, balanced way of how the House business is conducted. Lastly, before I take my seat, I have in the past Parliament prepared questions, submitted them before time, and it's 1.5 months before they're able to end up reaching here. I have been on the receiving end myself, which has not been in keeping with the conventions of the Parliament.
The confrontation that unfolded in the House on 27 January was not merely a procedural disagreement. It exposed a deeper constitutional tension about authority, neutrality, legitimacy, and trust in parliamentary governance. At its core, the dispute was about where power properly resides in a parliamentary democracy, in standing orders, in long-standing conventions, or in the discretionary authority of the Speaker as guardian of order. This matter is especially sensitive because the Speaker being referenced is Juliet Holness, not only the presiding officer of the House, but also the spouse of the Prime Minister. While the standing orders do not prohibit such a relationship, political reality demands a higher standard of perceived impartiality. In constitutional democracies, legitimacy is not sustained by legality alone, but by public confidence in fairness. Once that confidence begins to erode, even technically correct rulings become politically fragile. The members' concerns fall into three broad and logically connected areas. The danger of procedural power becoming political power, the tension between standing orders and parliamentary convention, the risk to institutional legitimacy when neutrality is questioned. Each of these was clearly articulated, whether explicitly or implicitly. Exchanges first, the gatekeeping concern is not trivial. Members argued that allowing the Speaker to determine when questions are vetted and when they appear on the order paper gives the chair de facto control over the timing of accountability. In parliamentary systems, question time is one of the most powerful tools available to non-executive members. It is how government is made answerable in real time. If that mechanism is slowed, delayed, or filtered too heavily, it weakens the opposition's constitutional role. The fear expressed was not that vetting itself is wrong. Every speaker must ensure questions comply with standing orders. The fear was about discretion without temporal limits. If there is no defined time within which vetting must occur, then the Speaker becomes not only a procedural referee, but also an arbiter of political urgency. A question delayed for 2 weeks in a fast-moving political environment can become politically useless. That is not a technical inconvenience, a democratic injury. Thus, when members said the Speaker was becoming a gatekeeper, they were pointing to a structural risk that procedural authority could evolve into agenda-controlling authority.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled Administration Shared Community Act 2026. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of the bill.
Question and answers to question.
Mr. Speaker, I'm seeking clarification again because an attempt was made by a member to inquire or to submit questions to the Speaker for approval for tabling today. And it was followed by, again, a document circulated to the member, which confused the process. And I'm really hoping that we can clarify this finally. Also, to get a clear timeline as to when, what time during Monday, question was submitted for them to be properly vetted or tabling to. Because I think it's not fair that the member having submitted the questions for vetting yesterday, the approval of the consent. So I'm urging that a definitive statement be made as to what time on the Monday is a cutoff time for the taking of questions, so that we don't have a conflict of affairs going forward.
I think on this matter, the Speaker has issued clear directions in relation to the questions to be submitted. I think my resolution is within at least 24 hours before one intends to table them. But this is a process. Once the questions are tabled, then the questions, in accordance with the standing order, have to be vetted, looked at, examined by the Speaker to ensure that they are in accordance with said standing orders. We would have gone through this process already. This letter, my understanding, the questions would have come in yesterday, and the Speaker at the time gotten the chance as yet to look at it, and as such, the questions are not now here with us. As we can all appreciate, the Speaker is not in the House at this time, and as such, as such, based on the time when the questions arrived, and the Speaker not being able to peruse questions at that time, the questions are not yet before us. I'm very certain that as soon as the Speaker can peruse the questions, once the questions are in keeping with the standing orders, then the questions will be so tabled at the next appropriate time.
Mr. Speaker, the standing order says the questions are delivered before the sitting of the House. The decision was that at least 24 hours before. If a member submits his or her question 24 hours before, it's no business of the member whether the Speaker look at it or not. It's supposed to be with it before the sitting. It can be 10 minutes before. It can be 10 minutes before. Okay? So if the Speaker says 24 hours, the member make them available to the clerk before. Okay? If the member deliver to the clerk 24 hours before, it's not the member's fault. So they didn't have the time to look at them. Why they have the clerks with the 24 hours before? It's not the member's fault. The Speaker took 24 hours, the member filled his or her obligation, so it's not our business whether or not the Speaker look at it. It's our obligation to review it. So don't tell the member this time. Don't tell the member. Don't tell the member the Speaker didn't get a chance to look at it. That's not unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. We don't bring down to that level to come with this nonsense before they get a chance to read it. Nonsense.
Before you just read from the standing order. Based on my information, turn them back. Based on my information, the questions were submitted at 3:41 p.m. yesterday. That is my information. Before you all speak, I'll be reading from the standing order as it relates to questions. Section 14, nature of question, subsection 2. Notice of a question may be handed by a member to the clerk during the period known as question time. Every such notice shall be signed by the member giving it. A member who desires an oral answer to a question shall mark his notice with an asterisk, and a question not so marked shall require a written answer, which, when received, shall be circulated with the minutes of the proceedings of the House. Subject to paragraph 5, a question marked for oral answer shall be put down for a day to be named by the member, being a day not earlier than 21 clear days after the question has appeared on the question paper. I am reading from the book, that's all.
Mr. Speaker, in adopting the position advanced earlier by the member from Southwest St. Catherine. I'd just like to say, Mr. Speaker, that anything can happen to the sitting Speaker. And if we can advance now by urging the Deputy Speaker to also be in a position to vet these questions and to signal approval. So it need not have to wait on the substantive Speaker to address these routine matters. And the section that you have read already, Mr. Speaker, it really is not relevant to the issue at hand. Right?
So, Mr. Speaker, I would have just gotten sight of the Speaker's ruling on this matter the last time that it came up. And what I said earlier was not a part of the Speaker in relation to the 24-hour period. What the Speaker had indicated in her ruling is that standing orders are to be strictly adhered to. In other words, at question time, the member looking to the questions are to hand up the questions at that time. At that time, the questions, then there will be a vetting of questions. It does not mean that the questions being handed up at this time, that the Speaker who is currently sitting in the House will be able to vet them immediately and to see if they are keeping with the standing order. And to be clear, let me just read what was said. Standing Orders 15 provides a notice of a question may be handed to the clerk during question time. So when the Speaker indicates question time, all members are reminded that strict adherence to this standing order is required to avoid confusion or conflict. So in other words, bringing it in before 24 hours, that's the methodology. Right? So, no, that's not what this is. Once received by the clerk, when it comes to question. Once received by the clerk, each question must be submitted to the Speaker to enable the discharge of the responsibilities under Standing Order 16.2. That standing order empowers the Speaker to determine whether a question infringes any or constitutes an abuse of the right of questioning, and to direct the question to be amended or entered in the order book with such alterations as may be necessary. The Speaker's review ensures the questions are properly framed, comply with the standing orders, and may be tabled in an orderly and procedurally correct manner. According to Standing Order 15.2, accordingly, Standing Order 15.2 does not guarantee same-day tabling. Immediately, questions submitted during question time under Standing Order 15.2 will be received and reviewed by the Speaker. All questions will be tabled following the completion of the Speaker's review once deemed to be in full compliance with the standing orders. The procedure safeguards the rights of members, ensures the orderly management of parliamentary business, and confirms that all questions comply with the standing orders. Members are therefore expected to comply fully with these directions. As such, we can recommit question time for the member to submit to the clerk questions. And then the Speaker will review the questions for the questions to be in keeping with the standing orders in accordance with 15.2. Once that review is done, then questions will be tabled. Let us you at the table in accordance with the standing orders. So let us proceed with that standing order. Yes. That is the Speaker's ruling. Is it? No, that's the note. Just to be clear, members, I would have said earlier, and that was incorrect. What the Speaker has indicated is what I just read. That was her ruling that in keeping with the standing orders, during question time, the questions are to be tabled, and then they'll be reviewed by the Speaker to ensure that they're in keeping with the standing orders. It's very clear. Sent to all members.
Member from St. Catherine Southeastern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having followed the logic of the leader of government business and the ruling by the Speaker, what we are doing is concentrating the powers of a gatekeeper into the hands of the Speaker. Yes. Because if you submit something and the Speaker decides that it's going to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we can end up in a situation where the tabling of the questions will be delayed until the matter is no longer relevant. Now, where did this 24 hours come from? And why is it that we were referring to 24 hours and then the pushback to say that late by half an hour no longer stood? We're hearing now that it is going to be tabled during questions. Speaker, maybe this year the questions will be deemed appropriate.
The ruling from the Speaker was from last December. So pay attention to that. It's from last. So it's not just now. It has been here for at least a month or so.
Mr. Speaker, I rise simply for clarity. I was actually in the House one Tuesday afternoon when the Speaker made a big point about making sure that the questions came in time before. Yes, I was sitting there. No one told me. I heard it with my own 2 ears. In fact, the point that you have raised was the point a member sought to make. And he was made to seem as if he was ignorant to the standing orders. In fact, the Speaker did say that he should know better because he had been here before. And so I do not want us to just run across it like that and pretend that the Speaker did not give us different instructions separate to the note that she had written. In fact, if you just allow me, I'm ending now. In fact, the problem has been that in trying to keep order, sometimes the Speaker goes beyond what she is supposed to. And I think that just a little discretion and treating us as adults to listen to the points that we are making in that conversation would assist.
Mr. Speaker, you know, I'll start with the last point made by the member. One of the challenges that we have is probably that point about discretion. What the Speaker has consistently tried to do is to keep us in line with the standing order. It doesn't have to do with treating anybody like children, but we are a parliament of rules, and the rules are contained in standing orders. And if as adults we do not like the rules, if as adults we do not like the rules, we do not chastise the person who is keeping the rules. We use the processes to amend the rules. So it's very important that we do not misrepresent the approach of the Speaker. And the beauty with this Speaker, other than indicating her view, is that the Speaker reduces to writing in very clear terms her position and rules on matters. And what she does is to consult and then to issue a ruling. So on the 2nd day of December, 2025, on the Speaker's ruling on the House of Parliament documentation, the Speaker has a very clear ruling. I ask all members to familiarize themselves with the ruling. Secondly, to the member from St. Catherine, the standing orders don't make the Speaker the gatekeeper. It is very clear. Standing order 16 says, the 16.1 says, the right to ask a question shall be subject to the following general rules as to the interpretation of which the Speaker shall be the sole judge. There's only one Speaker, and the Speaker has to be that judge. So again, clear, and I apologize to the House earlier in relation to not first consulting with the Speaker's very clear ruling. To be clear, when the House reaches the agenda item, question time, the member who is desirous of asking questions are to submit their questions to the clerk. The clerk will work with the Speaker in relation to the review of those questions. I appreciate the questions about time frame. It's one of the issues that the standing order is silent on. However, I am very sure, especially whether it be the Deputy Speaker or the Speaker, it will be done in reasonable time. Reasonable is a construct of law. Reasonable time. Reasonable has to be depending on the questions, whether the Speaker is going to assess whether the questions fit in to the rules. So if you ask about 30 questions, 35 maybe, under different categories. You understand? So I understand there is no attempt to straight, it's an attempt to put a system in place. Let's stick with the standing orders. Speaker.
Second, the clash between standing orders and parliamentary convention reveals a deeper constitutional philosophy. Standing orders are written law. Conventions are unwritten constitutional understandings that give life to those rules. The Speaker's defenders leaned heavily on the literal text of the standing orders, especially the clauses granting the Speaker sole authority to interpret them. The critics, however, were appealing to convention. The idea that speakers historically acted as neutral facilitators rather than proactive regulators. This is an old constitutional tension. In Westminster systems, the speaker is both powerful and restrained. Powerful because their word is final in the chamber, restrained because tradition demands minimal intrusion into political contestation. Members arguing that it has never happened before were not making a legal argument. They were making a legitimacy argument. They were saying, yes, you may have the power, but have you exercised it in a way that preserves trust? This is why reference was made to the Privileges Committee. That committee represents collective parliamentary sovereignty. It symbolizes that the House, not the Speaker alone, ultimately defines its operational culture. The argument was that procedural evolution should arise from consensus, not from unilateral reinterpretation. Third, the conflict was intensified by the political identity of the Speaker. Juliet Holness occupies a uniquely sensitive position. Even if every ruling she makes is legally defensible, perception matters. When procedural authority appears to constrain opposition activity and the Speaker is married to the head of government, suspicion becomes structurally unavoidable. It is not personal, it is institutional. Political systems are designed to protect against conflicts of interest precisely because trust is fragile. Members were therefore not merely questioning a ruling. They were questioning whether the office of Speaker was being enough from executive power. That is a constitutional anxiety, not a partisan tantrum. When one member said, "It is unusual, it is controversial, we have never had this before," he was pointing to an erosion of what might be called procedural compliance, the condition where rules operate invisibly because all sides trust their application. Once procedure becomes the main subject of debate, the institution itself is under stress. The most profound moment came when it was said, "It is not for the Speaker to unilaterally and arbitrarily set rules on the running of the House." This statement strikes at the philosophical heart of parliamentary democracy. The Speaker is an umpire, not a legislator of process. The umpire enforces rules that already exist. They do not manufacture new norms by interpretation alone. If interpretation begins to resemble rule-making, authority shifts away from Parliament as a collective body and toward a single office. That is constitutionally dangerous. The second confrontation you referenced, where members stated that a Speaker's ruling cannot override standing orders, was a necessary constitutional reminder. It reaffirmed the hierarchy of authority. Standing orders, Parliament, Speaker, not Speaker, standing orders, Parliament. That distinction matters deeply. Blurred, parliamentary democracy subtly morphs into procedural centralism. What happened on January 27th was therefore not disorder. It was institutional self-defense. The House was wrestling publicly with the boundaries of authority. That is uncomfortable but healthy in a constitutional democracy. The danger is not in argument. The danger is in silence.
Mr. Speaker, I had it long ago on the mic on. That's why I'm catching this eye now. My mic has been on before the leader spoke.
Member from St. Catherine Southern, go ahead.
First, I want to remove another member from West Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the matter of the rulings of the Speaker in recent times have become very controversial. And it is unusual. It is unusual. The standing order in number 72, Privileges Committee of Parliament. The standing order allows for the rules that govern the operations, the privileges be settled.
Let me hear the point of order. Turn your mic on, please.
I think it's very inappropriate to be discussing a matter involving the Speaker in the absence of the Speaker. And furthermore, and furthermore, Mr. Speaker, to question the standing orders on which the Parliament is operating. Mr. Speaker, I believe that it is a point of order. It is a point of order.
Continue.
And the members are using this for grandstanding. The grandstanding. And you should not allow it, Mr. Speaker. You should not. Not yet.
My mic was on.
Members, you continue to have the crosstalk. Then we will continue the business of the House. I gave you the floor and you started to make some comments, which is no way in keeping with the standing order that you're raising on. Understand? Please. No, you don't have to respond to my comment. You stand the ground to make a statement. Go ahead quickly with it. So, all right, so we can move on then because you weren't making a statement.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Member from St. Catherine, Southern, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker. Hold on, Faith. Hold on, Faith. Mr. Speaker. Faith. Hold on.
Member from St. Catherine, so sit.
Turn his mic on.
I will say this. When I asked the member to sit a while ago, I asked the member from St. Catherine Southern to sit because his mic from I was asking the member whose mic was on to sit so I could address him. But you continue to shout across the floor. I am saying to you, your mic was on, and before you could even start to make your presentation, cross talking with another member. You did. I'm going to ask you, member. I'm going to ask you to sit now. I'm going to ask you to sit. Member from St. Catherine, Southwestern. I am ruling on this. I am asking the member from St. Catherine, Southwestern. Your mic is lighted up and I'm going to turn it on now. Your person will have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, no. Hold on. Mr. Speaker, my mic is on.
Mr. Speaker.
Sit. My mic.
Member, the only reason you're behaving in that manner simply gave you the floor. All you did was I was giving the person next to speak, and he is going to speak. Member from St. Catherine, South. Member from St. Catherine, South. Oh, my God.
controversy about the Speaker. We have been easily adhered by that. We have walked that road before. The privileged committee in the Parliament sets out a way to arrive at a consensus around how the House of Business are conducted. It is not for the Speaker to unilaterally, arbitrarily set the rules and the running of the House. And if the Speaker, the Parliament will change from time to time. Whichever side in government abide by the common agreed rules. And that's the reason why the rules in the House ought to be arrived at a consensus on both sides. Not by the opposition by itself, and neither by the government. It's a Parliament of members. And all we're asking for, the rules that will obtain as regards questions or any other matters that private members, how to deal with procedurally, they settle there. The ruling of the Speaker umpire is to ensure that the decision of the moment when the House is in session is in keeping with those agreed provisions. Now, that is understanding order is recognized because it says both sides must agree. So even if the standing order is explicit on a particular point, there is nonetheless an agreed way with those matters are dealt. Mr. Speaker, very respectfully and humbly so. If we continue with that debate, which has not been controversial before, we won't have problems in the House. And for heaven's sake, we don't want posterity to judge the tension of this case in a very, very unfavorable way. So I make a plea. Let us revert the last way of how the House of Business is conducted. I asked for it. I had in the past Parliament prepared questions submitted before time, and it's 1.5 months before they were able to end up reaching here. I have not been restraining myself, not been in keeping with the conventions of the Parliament. So I give my duties. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, you also give reference to the ruling by the Speaker. You read of this and all. But may I draw the attention that the Speaker's ruling cannot be in conflict with the standing order. And if your ruling in conflict with the standing order,
Speaker, I just wanted to add my concern with the conversation because I don't know if I'm hearing something different, but it's coming across from what I've heard. And I said from South, if the Speaker is on the and she's doing no, let me finish, please. That is not my experience, and that's not what I heard the House Leader read. The House Leader read the ruling of the Speaker, which from listening to it, the Speaker's ruling was consistent with the standing order. So remember from St. Catherine, if you're asking the Speaker to be consistent with the standing order, then the ruling of the Speaker is her action in relation to questions that we pose or table is consistent. To ask her not to speak or not to do that would be asking her to be consistent with the standing order. So I just want to make it very clearly, Mr. Speaker, let us not paint the picture that the Speaker is operating in a manner that's not consistent with the standing order, because that's not true. That's not true. Speaker, the rule is very clear, it is consistent with the standing order.
So, Mr. Speaker, I think the member from Central was on But there is no clarity in relation to these provisions. The calendars they have not been adhered to over the years. This speaker is saying we are adhering to the standing order, and that benefit every member of our house. As a member from table this question would have been answered in the time work I could hear that because it makes sense. From same time to the who be private members motion, they have to be made in keeping with the standing order. The member of same time to I'm talking now. What I'm saying, we are adhering to the standing order.
That may be made an expense of the public business. Motion relating to the sitting of the House. Motion for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills. Leave to the House first or taking it.
I know, but the suspension of the standing order has enabled me to take the first reading of a bill shortly entitled the Registration of the Shared Community Act 2026.
The question is that the standing order be suspended to allow the minister to take the first reading of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it.